scary story time. November 92. Finally, I will leave this country. I finally got the visa and I want to go to Eastern Europe to be an engineering consultant at a number of airports there in succession. This is a beautiful dream that I never thought would come true. Perhaps the credit goes to my psychiatrist. He healed me from my successive traumas and made me return to life little by little. Goodbye Egypt, forever. As for my wife, she seems excited like a young child going to an amusement park for the first time in his life. When I told her the news of the trip, she jumped with joy and clapped her hands in excitement. I laughed at her cute appearance, especially with her small body and those two braids on either side of her head. She really looks like a child. Even though we don't have children, she is my sweet little girl. God, how much I love her. Finally, we will travel. Finally. December 5th. We arrived at Poland airport. It's freezing cold in a way that surprised me. The winter here is really harsh and there is snow everywhere. But it is charming, beautiful. The new atmosphere upon us with its splendor, beauty, and difference excites you. And fear. I stand at the door of the plane inhaling the icy air violently. My lungs almost freeze and I also cough violently as if I inhaled a number of pins. But I'm happy. I turned to my wife and was surprised by her appearance. She looked sad. I know she has been sad since we went to the airport in the first place, but I don't understand her. It's not ours, relatives or friends in our country almost. Why sadness? We headed to a hotel close to the airport while I waited for a suitable apartment. They gave me a large sum of money so that I could find a suitable home for myself. They seemed to be fools after all. December 7th. My luck seems wonderful. I found a beautiful small apartment, one of those practical apartments that characterize the West where everything is in one place, the kitchen, the living room, and a separate bedroom. Moreover, it is furnished with furniture that looks comfortable. It is only missing a TV. That's okay. I will buy one tomorrow, and the rent is really cheap. My wife was waiting in a cozy cafe near my current location. As soon as I agreed to rent this apartment, I returned and took my wife to see it. I felt passion as she walked beside me through the snow. We have that evidence before us. Until we reached the building, and then we went to the apartment. We walked around the apartment and then I asked her what she thought. She smiled palely and nodded her head in agreement with a weak gesture. The poor woman was shivering from the cold. She loves the sunflowers and blue sky just like kittens. So she always felt sick and upset with all this cold, but she finally felt happy when she lit the heater for her. At that time it seemed like a comfortable little house. Life seems more beautiful. December 20th. I'm starting to get bored of this country. For 2 weeks and nothing has been happening at all. All its people do nothing but go to work during the day and drink alcohol at night to resist the cold. I always finished my work and walked in the middle of this great white of snow and then entered the warm house. Maybe I bought some things for the house because my wife had not left the house since we lived in. The strange thing is that every time I entered I found her sitting in a loose nightgown in front of the window staring the snow. While the heater is working at maximum power, making the atmosphere really hot. The routine has never changed and she always sits in front of the window absent-mindedly. She seems depressed and I don't know what to do. I know that she wants to return to Egypt and she has asked me more than once to return. She is afraid of this apartment, afraid of this country, and feels uncomfortable. I was listening to her silently, then holding her to my chest in silence. She had stopped eating and had become pale and thin, and her beauty was fading little by little. The truth is that my heart is truly afraid of this dark apartment. Despite all the scattered lighting, I always feel dark. That deadly silence surrounding us as if the world outside had died and there was no sound except the sound of the wind. Even the television does not show anything intelligible that can be followed. What do? I will think of a solution. December 22nd. Today I entered the house to find my wife rushing into my arms crying in terror. I took her in my arms as she was shaking from crying and her head was shaking in my chest. Seconds then she raised her terrified eyes begging me to leave this apartment immediately. She felt terrified and it was clearly visible on her face wet with tears and snot and her wide terrified eyes. The same looks as a small cat trapped against a wall in front of a thick foot about to kick it. T stay there another night and she begs me to get her out of here right now. Her voice. She was trembling and her body was shaking and she began to sob and cry as if she had never cried before. I hugged her. I started to pat her and whispered in her little ear that she would calm down and that everything would be okay. But I myself am not convinced of what I am saying. In a very low voice I heard her muttering between her sobs. She was repeating, "You don't understand anything. You don't understand." I began to calm her down and pat her on the head while she was crying like a child. I picked her up and walked a few steps, then gently placed her on the comfortable sofa and knelt down next to her, kissing her hand, cheek, and forehead, and she calmed down a little. Then she raised her eyes red from crying and whispered, "If I don't get out of here, I will die." Her words coincided with the sound of thunder outside. I rose up. It was windy outside, the temperature was very low, and it was snowing all the time. I took my wife in my arms silently. I didn't know what to say. She was the poor thing, she was shivering despite the heat of the apartment. I told her firmly that we are leaving this place, the apartment, tomorrow. She raised her head and for the first time I saw the ghost of a smile on her lips. Then she gave me a warm kiss on my cheek. I called my workplace and informed them of my absence tomorrow, and I made my decision. As soon as the storm calms down and we can go out, we will go to a hotel. Or maybe to a psychiatrist. December 32. Today my wife died. January 1st. While the world outside celebrates drinks and dances, I sit in the apartment alone. I cry. I cannot forget the day my wife died. I woke up that day to go to the bathroom, but I did not find her next to me on the bed. Where do you think she went? When she came out, I found her standing in the middle of the apartment in her loose white nightgown. His eyes are strange. The whites of her eyes are completely red. I stood contemplating this strange sight, and my heart beat like a drum resounding in my ears. She extended her foot towards me with a stumbling, convulsive step, while 2 lines of blood ran down her cheeks, 2 lines emanating from her eyes. After 2 steps, she stood up and began to convulse in her stance, her head tilting with a frightening tilt, and she fell to the ground. Then I convulsed. She was making strange sounds from her throat, crackling and gurgling, and her body was moving scary cramp. I ran towards her to pick her up from the ground, but she put her hands around my neck, choking me. Her eyes contain evil fear, anger, and panic all together. She removed her convulsive hands from my neck while Talia's blood flowed from her mouth, and she began whispering words I did not understand with her lips. I brought my ear close to her lips. She was saying and repeating, "I love you, I love you, I love you." Then she took a violent inhale, looked at me suddenly, and said in a harsh voice, "You are next." Her head twisted back and a violent sound came from her neck. It wasn't long before her body completely collapsed. My wife died. I heard screaming sounds, and a wailing and hooting sound like the hooting of an owl while I was holding her in my arms. My wife died. Oh God, I cannot bear it. My wife died. My wife died. My wife, my beloved, passed away. I called an ambulance and everything was done. The next day I was in the hearse going to bury her in the nearby cemetery, and there were some cold-faced work friends with me. I watched the coffin land 6 feet below the ground. She watched the undertaker spread sand on her coffin. "Everything is over." I did not feel my friends shaking my hand, patting me on the shoulder, consoling me, or anything. I remained standing until the evening, looking at her grave. Who would believe that my beloved was under the grave? My heart splits. I cry and scream, then I come back and wander. I sit sometimes and I stand sometimes, as if I were waiting for you to rise from the ground, to give me an indication of its presence. Nothing. At sunset, I turned around and headed back to my fucking house. I hate home, I hate my job, I hate the whole world. I want to die now. I walked into my apartment as if it was filled with smoke, fog. I don't know. I immediately threw myself on my bed and kept crying until I fell asleep. January 2nd. May God have mercy on my wife. Now I know why she never went out. For more than a week I try and fail. Here in this apartment there is evil. How many times do I open the apartment door and go out into the corridor? I find myself in the heart of the apartment. I turn around and go out the apartment door to find myself inside the kitchen. The apartment is messing with me. I sleep in my bedroom and wake up on the living room tiles. I prepare food to eat and suddenly the bowl is empty, so I go out in panic to find the food placed on the table. Steam slowly rises from it. The apartment is crazy, or I'm the crazy one. Yesterday I opened the window and jumped out to escape or die. I stood receiving the air. It is snowing and I look at the asphalt beneath me. I took a deep breath and jumped out of the window to fall and die, but I fell bad. I started screaming, crying, and tearing up the pillows, but there was no answer. No one from the passers-by sees me. No one hears me from the neighbors. I tried to turn on the TV to make a noise, but all that appeared was a black shadow that looked faint. His hand is under his chin. And no sound. And the devilish tampering. The water taps open and close on their own. The doors move all the time. I open the tap to drink and find that what comes out is water the color of blood. Or is it blood? I will die here. A while ago one of my colleagues called me and I answered him anxiously as I could not contact anyone at all. Every time I picked up the phone I would just hear a noise. As soon as I opened the call anxiously, I found my phone flying out of my hand and falling to the ground. The amplified voice on the phone specifically for me to hear clarifies a conversation between my colleague who is checking on me. My voice, which tells him that I need more time. I screamed that this was not true and that I needed help. My food had run out and I was going to die. And no one answers. The line hung up and I collapsed on the ground crying. The sound of the icy wind whistling intensified. And the whisper gets louder. You are next. You are next. I scream that I know, let us end the matter now. Then, the power went out. January 3rd. A whole night without electricity, without a heater, without warmth. I spent a whole night in my bed under my covers in the dark, a whole night listening. My wife's head snapped and the wind whistled and whispered. In the morning the warmth returned with the electricity, and yet I remained in my bed. When the warmth spread I got up to make something to drink and found hot drink on me the desk. I did not discuss. I extended my hand and picked up the cup and raised it to my lips without even knowing what it was. And the absurdity has begun. The whole day. Furniture changes place throughout the day. The walls change colors throughout the day. The walls are moving. Moving. It narrows and narrows, then expands and expands. I ran to take cover in my bed when suddenly the carpet was pulled from under my feet and I fell. On my nose and blood is flowing. It seems like it broke. I tried to get up to find something flying towards my head and it was a violent blow that made me lie on the ground and not move. What a pain. I extend my hand to feel warm blood flowing onto the carpet, which he turns away from in disgust. I remained in my place. I heard a heavy thumping behind me. I stretched my eyes with difficulty to see the giant library walking towards me. My heart beats. He stands behind me and sways until she falls on top of me. Oh, the pain. I feel 1 or 2 broken ribs. I scream and my voice comes out. I muffle blood dripping from my lips. And it's all over here. I remained in place for about an hour, afraid to move so that I don't know. I don't want to know who's attacking me. Slowly, I walked towards my room and fell asleep. January 4th. I woke up to the terrible sound. You are next. You are next. I got up with difficulty to find chaos all over the place, utensils colliding with each other. Chairs collide with each other and everything collides with everything as if it were a party. For crazy people. I put my palm on my ear and the noise increases. Something hits me on the head. Something hits me on the back violently and I fly, falling on my face and screaming hoarsely from the pain of my broken ribs. And everything attacks me and I lose consciousness. January 5th. I woke up from my coma on my bed, my whole body screaming in pain and dry blood. On my clothes and my left eye was completely closed from the brutal beating. I tried to get up, but I failed when I saw my wife entering the place. My eyes widened and I gasped. Impossible. She sat next to me smiling, putting the paper and pen in my hand and pointing. To complete. So I wondered in fear. I know it's a ghost, but it's a beautiful ghost. Her smile widened and 2 long fangs appeared from under her lips. Her eyes are completely black. What do you want from me? The walls began to move around me again and terrifying sounds began to emerge. Around me. I completed what happened, and then my wife, the ghost of my wife, got up and embraced me and he disappeared. Now the apartment is getting narrower, narrower and narrower and narrower. God, I can't breathe. I will die. There's something pulls down. No. January 8th. News in one of the local newspapers about the disappearance of an Egyptian engineer under mysterious circumstances. The news is accompanied by his picture indicating that he lived on the last floor of Building No. 32. When they raided his apartment, they found nothing but an empty, organized, clean apartment with no trace of anything in it. Strangely, this is the 3rd case of disappearance in this particular apartment.